My beloved child, pause here. Do not let your hand move past this moment as though it were ordinary. Something has been waiting to reach you, and the reason you are hearing these words now is because a truth that has been buried beneath silence can no longer remain hidden. What you are about to hear was meant to find you at the exact moment when your heart was strong enough to receive it, yet tender enough to understand what it truly means. There is someone connected to your soul who has been carrying a weight they never intended to keep for this long. They have tried to live around it. They have tried to smile through it, work through it, sleep through it, and convince themselves that time would make the burden disappear. But time did not erase it. Time only made the silence louder. And now, in the quietest part of their heart, they are saying, I cannot carry this guilt another day. You deserve the truth. Stay with these words, because what they feel guilty about is not as simple as one mistake, one conversation, or one moment of weakness. It is connected to a choice they made when fear was speaking louder than love. It is connected to something they withheld from you because they believed the truth would change how you saw them. And although they told themselves they were protecting you, deep down they knew they were also protecting themselves. Heaven has watched this hidden struggle unfold. There were nights when they reached for their phone and nearly told you everything. Their fingers hovered over your name. Their heart pounded as though a door inside them was about to break open. They wrote messages and deleted them. They imagined your reaction, then allowed fear to create the worst possible ending. They whispered your name in rooms where no one could hear them, and each time they did, the guilt returned with even greater force. You may have felt this without understanding it. Perhaps there were moments when a strange heaviness entered your heart for no clear reason. Perhaps you suddenly thought of them while doing something completely unrelated. Perhaps you felt an invisible distance between you, even when their words sounded normal. Your spirit noticed the gap between what they said and what they carried. You were not imagining it. Something remained unfinished. Something remained unspoken. And that unspoken truth began to shape the connection in ways neither of you fully understood. My child, listen carefully. The guilt they carry is not proof that they never cared. In fact, the depth of their guilt reveals just how much your opinion matters to them. They are not haunted because you meant nothing. They are haunted because you meant more than they were prepared to admit. They knew you offered them something rare. You offered sincerity in a world where they had learned to expect hidden motives. You offered patience when they were accustomed to people leaving at the first sign of difficulty. You offered emotional safety, even while you were still healing wounds of your own. And rather than fully trusting that gift, they questioned it. They wondered whether your kindness was temporary. They wondered whether your affection would disappear once you saw the parts of them they kept hidden. They wondered whether they were worthy of the kind of love you were quietly offering. And because they doubted their worth, they made choices that created the very distance they feared. That is the beginning of the truth, but it is not the deepest part. There was a moment when they could have been completely honest with you. The opportunity appeared naturally. You may not even have realized how important that moment was. Perhaps you asked a simple question. Perhaps you looked into their eyes and gave them space to speak. Perhaps the conversation became quiet, and for a few seconds, they felt the truth rising toward their lips. But they stopped it. They gave you only part of the story. They changed the subject. They offered an answer that was not entirely false, yet it was not complete enough to be called the truth. And from that moment forward, the guilt began. At first, they believed they would correct it later. They said to themselves, I will tell them when the timing is better. I will explain when I understand my own feelings. I will confess when I know they will not walk away. But the perfect moment never came. The longer they waited, the more difficult honesty became. One hidden detail required another explanation. One avoided conversation created another layer of distance. And soon they were no longer only afraid of revealing what happened. They were afraid of admitting how long they had kept it from you. There is something important you must understand before the truth is revealed. Their silence was not calm. It was a storm disguised as quietness. Every time you showed them kindness, they felt the guilt sharpen. Every time you trusted them, they felt unworthy of that trust. Every time you spoke of hope, connection, or a future that could have existed, a voice inside them said, "They do not know everything." They began to pull away, not because their feelings had vanished, but because closeness made the secret harder to bear. This is why their behavior may have seemed confusing. One moment, they appeared drawn toward you. The next, they seemed distant. One day, they spoke with warmth. The next, they became guarded. At times, they may have seemed ready to open their heart, only to disappear behind silence again. You wondered whether you had done something wrong. You examined your words. You replayed conversations. You questioned whether you had been too open, too caring, too hopeful, or not enough. But the truth is that much of their inconsistency was never about your value. It was about the battle inside them. They were fighting the desire to be known against the fear of being judged. They were fighting the urge to return against the shame that told them they had waited too long. They were fighting love with guilt, and guilt was winning because guilt always speaks in a voice that sounds final. It told them, "You have ruined everything." It told them, "They will never understand." It told them, "It is safer to remain silent than to risk losing them completely." But heaven has been speaking too. Heaven has been telling them that silence is not safety. Heaven has been showing them that truth may be painful for a moment, but hidden guilt can poison years. Heaven has been reminding them that real love cannot grow where honesty is constantly postponed. And recently, something shifted. A moment occurred that they could not ignore. It may have been a dream, a conversation, a song, a memory, or an unexpected reminder of you. Something pierced through the defenses they had carefully built. For a few seconds, they saw the situation without excuses. They saw your heart. They saw their choices. They saw how much time had passed. And they broke inwardly. Not in a way the world could easily notice. They may have continued their day. They may have answered messages, completed responsibilities, or spoken normally to others. But inside, the truth stood before them like a mirror. They could no longer pretend that silence was protecting anyone. They realized that you had been carrying confusion they created. They realized that while they feared your judgment, you had been left to judge yourself. They realized that their refusal to explain had forced you to invent answers, and many of those answers caused you pain. That realization changed something. For the first time, their guilt began to become courage. Not complete courage yet. Not enough to reveal everything in one breath. But enough for them to admit, at least to themselves, "I must tell the truth." My child, this is where the spiritual movement begins. The connection between two souls is not maintained by fantasy. It is tested by truth. Feelings may create the bond, but honesty determines whether the bond can survive reality. Your soulmate is being brought to a threshold where they must choose between the temporary comfort of silence and the possibility of genuine healing. They are afraid. They are afraid you will hear the truth and decide they are not who you believe them to be. They are afraid you will see their hesitation as betrayal. They are afraid that the damage has already become permanent. But there is another fear growing stronger than all the others. They are now afraid of losing the chance to ever tell you. This fear has entered their hearts suddenly and intensely. They have begun to understand that life keeps moving. People heal. Hearts become stronger. Doors that remain open for a season do not always remain open forever. They sense that you are changing, and although they may not know exactly how, they feel that you are no longer standing in the same emotional place where they left you. Your energy has shifted. You have endured nights they never saw. You have questioned yourself, cried silently, prayed for clarity, and slowly learned that unanswered questions cannot be allowed to define your worth. You may still care deeply, but you are no longer willing to abandon yourself just to remain connected to someone who refuses to communicate. They can feel this. They can feel you reclaiming your strength. And that is why the urgency has increased. They know that if they continue waiting, they may return to find that your heart has finally chosen peace over uncertainty. This does not mean you have stopped loving. It means your soul has begun to understand that love without clarity becomes exhaustion. Heaven is not asking you to chase them. Heaven is not asking you to ignore your boundaries. Heaven is not asking you to excuse every action simply because someone feels remorse. You are being prepared to hear truth without losing yourself inside it. That preparation matters because the truth may awaken emotions you believed you had already placed to rest. It may explain things that confused you. It may confirm certain feelings you tried to dismiss. It may also challenge the version of the story you created in order to survive the silence. But remember this, an explanation can bring understanding, yet understanding does not require immediate forgiveness. A confession can open a door, yet you are allowed to decide whether you walk through it. Their guilt belongs to them. Your healing belongs to you. The divine message is not that you must accept whatever comes. The message is that you are about to see more clearly. And clarity will return power to your hands. There is a specific reason they delayed telling you. At the center of their silence is a belief they have carried for a long time, the belief that love eventually turns into disappointment. Somewhere in their past, honesty cost them something. Perhaps they revealed their heart and were mocked. Perhaps they trusted someone who later used their vulnerability against them. Perhaps they watched a relationship collapse after a secret came to light. So when it came time to be fully transparent with you, their old wound took control. They did not see only you standing before them. They saw everyone who had ever abandoned them. They saw every memory that taught them to hide. They saw every painful ending and assumed history would repeat itself. This does not remove responsibility from their actions, but it reveals the root. They were not only hiding a truth. They were hiding from a wound. And yet, you became the one who felt the consequences. That is why their apology, when it comes, cannot be shallow. They know that, "I was scared," will not be enough. They know that saying, "I did not mean to hurt you," cannot erase the hurt. They know they must explain not only what happened, but why they allowed you to remain confused for so long. This is the conversation they have rehearsed in their mind. They imagine beginning with your name. Then they stop. They imagine saying, "There is something I should have told you." Then they hear the silence that might follow. They imagine your expression changing. They imagine you asking the question they fear most, "Why did you not trust me enough to tell me then?" And that question pierces them because they do not have an easy answer. The truth is, they did trust you. But they did not trust themselves. They did not trust their ability to survive your disappointment. They did not trust that love could remain after imperfection was revealed. They did not trust that they were allowed to make a mistake and still be worthy of grace. So they chose avoidance. And avoidance became a prison. There is one detail they have never admitted aloud to anyone. After the distance grew between you, they tried to convince themselves they could move on without telling you. They tried to close the chapter privately. They may have distracted themselves with work, social activity, another connection, or emotional numbness. They told themselves that whatever existed between you had become too complicated. But nothing they did brought peace. Because the heart cannot find closure through denial. They compared others to you. They noticed the absence of your presence in ordinary moments. They remembered the way you listened, the way you understood what they struggled to explain, the way your energy made them feel seen. And each memory carried the same accusation: you owed them the truth. This is why they could not fully release you. It was not only love that held the connection. It was unfinished honesty. There is a spiritual difference between attachment and unfinished truth. Attachment clings because it fears emptiness. Unfinished truth returns because the soul cannot settle while something essential remains hidden. Your connection contains both emotion and unfinished truth. That is why the energy has felt persistent. That is why memories return unexpectedly. That is why certain signs, songs, names, or dreams seem to appear when you believe you are finally becoming detached. But be careful, my child. Not every reminder is a command to return. Sometimes a reminder appears because healing requires understanding. Sometimes the past knocks not to reclaim your future, but to release you from the questions that kept you bound. What happens next will depend on the quality of their truth. Will they confess only enough to relieve their conscience, or will they speak with full responsibility? Will they ask you to comfort them, or will they finally acknowledge the pain you carried? Will they offer words, or will their actions begin to match what they claim? Heaven is watching these choices. And so are you. You are no longer the version of yourself who accepts fragments because you are afraid of losing the whole. You are no longer willing to call confusion a spiritual test when it is actually a lack of communication. You have grown. That growth is not punishment against them. It is protection for you. The person who comes toward you must now meet the strength that was born from their absence. They cannot return expecting access to the same unguarded heart while offering the same incomplete truth. They must come differently. They must come honestly. They must come without manipulation, excuses, or pressure. And somewhere within them, they know this. This is why the confession has taken so long. They are not only preparing words. They are trying to become the person capable of standing behind those words. There was a recent moment when they almost contacted you. Something happened that made them believe the time had arrived. They opened the conversation in their mind. They pictured themselves finally saying what had been trapped inside them. But then they saw something. Perhaps they noticed you appearing happier. Perhaps they heard that you were moving forward. Perhaps they saw a photograph, a message, or a sign that made them believe you might no longer need their explanation. For a moment, they nearly retreated again. They thought, maybe telling the truth now would only disturb their peace. But beneath that thought was another fear. What if they have learned to live without me? That question has not left them. They are beginning to understand that your healing is not evidence that you never cared. It is evidence that you had no choice but to learn how to survive without answers. And now their guilt has reached a breaking point. They have carried it into too many mornings. They have carried it through too many nights. They have carried it into conversations where they pretended to be fine. They have carried it while imagining you believing a version of events that was never complete. They cannot carry it another day. But before they tell you, heaven is speaking to your heart first. You must not confuse their confession with your obligation. You must not let the intensity of the moment erase the wisdom you gained. You must listen not only to what they reveal, but to what their behavior has already shown. Truth is not proven by tears alone. Guilt is not the same as transformation. Regret can open the door to change, but only accountability can walk through it. You will recognize sincerity by what happens after the confession. Do they become patient with your questions? Do they allow you to feel without rushing you toward forgiveness? Do they accept that trust may need to be rebuilt slowly? Do they respect your boundaries even when those boundaries are painful for them? These things will reveal more than any dramatic declaration. Yet there is another layer to this story, and it is the layer they fear revealing most. Their guilt is connected not only to what they did, but to something they believed about you. They listened to a voice that was not yours. They allowed an outside opinion, an old fear, or a misleading impression to influence how they interpreted your intentions. Instead of asking you directly, they created distance based on what they assumed. This is where the regret deepened. Because later, they discovered that the belief they acted upon was incomplete. They realized they may have judged your heart through the lens of someone else's fear. They began to see that you were more sincere than they allowed themselves to believe. And the moment they understood this, everything changed. They replayed your words with new meaning. They remembered gestures they once questioned and finally recognized the love behind them. They realized that while they were protecting themselves from imagined betrayal, they were quietly betraying the trust you had already given. This is the truth beneath the truth. They did not only hide something from you. They failed to believe you when your heart was speaking honestly. And now, the evidence of your sincerity has become impossible for them to ignore. Someone may have recently told them something about you. Something simple, yet powerful. Perhaps they learned what you defended when they were not present. Perhaps they discovered what you sacrificed without announcing it. Perhaps they heard how deeply you cared while pretending not to. Perhaps they found out that even after being hurt, you did not expose them, shame them, or turn their vulnerability into a weapon. That revelation broke through their defenses. They expected anger. They expected revenge. They expected you to respond the way others had responded in their past. But you did not. And your restraint became a mirror. It showed them the difference between who you were and who they feared you might be. This is why the confession is no longer only about relieving guilt. It is about acknowledging your truth. They want to tell you that they were wrong. They want to admit that they allowed fear to distort what was real. They want to say,